Okay, so I think we're gonna start. So first of all, hello and welcome to DoCaviv 2021 at the Cinematheque around Tel Aviv and online. My name is Tamar Kay and I'm delighted to be moderating this master class with producer Julie Goldman, a collaboration between DoCaviv and the Israeli documentary filmmaker Film. Julie Goldman is an Oscar-nominated and Emmy Award-winning producer and executive producer of documentary feature films and series. Julie is the first documentary producer to receive the Amazon Studio Sundance Institute Producers Award and the CineReach Producers Award. She founded Model Pictures in 2009 and has more than 100 producing and executive producing credits to her name, which is pretty amazing, including In the Same Breath, directed by Nan Fu Wang, which is currently screening in DoCaviv's international competition. DoCaviv is honored to be holding a tribute program for Julie's films this year. The program consists of a small sampling from her vast and impressive collection of work, In the Same Breath, Buck, and Life Animated. So this masterclass will last 1 hour. You are welcome, the audience that just joined us, that might join us later on, to leave your questions in the Q&A feature of Zoom, as well as in the comments of Facebook. So Julie, thank you so much. It is a real big honor to hold this conversation with you. Why don't you start telling us, oh, can I hear you?
Pleasure to speak.
Great. Why don't you start with telling us where you are so we can all envy you a bit and then dive into the questions.
Which is, we have our first film ever showing in Cannes, The Velvet Underground, just premiered last night. And I'm in a hotel room. I'm in like a little bit of the outside space.
And how's the experience? How was it last night?
It was amazing. It was like, I feel like it was a once in a lifetime. You know, we've had a lot of different kind of wonderful experiences with our films, but this one felt so different and fresh and really special. You know, it was, the director's Todd Haynes, so he is beloved here, and I think that the world of difference. And also the band is also really revered in France. So it was one of those screenings where it was, you couldn't, like, it's so loud, that film is so loud that you couldn't tell what people were experiencing. It's not like, you know, that feeling that you can have in a quiet cinema. And so we're like, okay, I hope that I'm enjoying it. And then at the end, there was like a 5-minute standing ovation. So it was pretty astonishing and exciting.
Beautiful, beautiful. Hope we'll be able to see it later on this year, next year.
Yes.
Great.
October.
Okay, great. So I have pretty much many questions, and I'm sure I'll also be receiving, but I would like to start in a way at the beginning. Is there like a time, an era, an event that you either fell in love in documentary or specifically in producing? Can you like kind of point at a moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think I fell in love with film early. And I was just went to see films all the time growing up in Manhattan, and I, you know, saw documentaries, but it wasn't really the thing. And when I was in film school, I got a job at First Run Features Icarus Films when they were a combined company, and that's when that was the documentary world, and it was a really incredible collection of films, and that completely like shifted my focus to documentary because just one terrific film after another that I worked on there, selling to the educational and international market. Yes.
And did you know from the beginning that you want to be a producer? Is it something that you were like aiming towards?
You know, I knew pretty early because when I was in school and when I was, you know, PAing and working, I always did every different department so I could learn about it.
Okay.
And I realized I wanted to know all of the different departments because I ultimately wanted to be in charge, and I didn't want anyone to be able to tell me, oh, you can't do this, because without me having concrete knowledge. So it became clear pretty quickly. The control freak in me meshed with producing.
And I have a question because I think that many people don't really understand what producers do. You know, like these boxes on Facebook that was like, what do you really do? And what people think you do.
Yeah.
So what do you really do? What do producers really do?
I mean, I think I can certainly speak to like the kind of creative producing that we do, which is very much like we like to be on a film from the very beginning. So if that's the case, we are creatively involved with kind of creating the materials and the shaping of the pitch of the film, trying to raise funds for the film, and then throughout the process, working on and sometimes, for instance, with Velvet Underground, since Todd had never directed a documentary and it was all interviews that we were doing, we set up all the interviews, we did all the transport, we were there for the interviews, we worked on the questions together, all of that. And then, so that it can be that involved, or it can be, there's so many times in documentaries where it's really like 2 or 3 people that should be there together, and you don't want to have more than that on the shoots. So in that case, we will kind of stay back, but be very, very involved in what's going on with all of the shoots. So it shifts in that way. And then with post-production, we're extremely involved, especially my partner, Chris Clements, who is like, king of story, so.
Is this something that's like important for you at each film to be involved in the post-production, especially?
Yeah, it is, because that's so much of how you really create documentaries.
Yeah. Writing part. Yeah. And you, your baby model was born in 2009, right? Your production company. Can you define in a way your production company? Are there stories that you were more into? How did you decide if you invest in the story or not?
I spent a lot of time trying to think of a name for the company, and he came up with motto, and it was like, because I kept saying, well, I want us to, whatever the name of the company is saying that we want to stand for something.
Yeah. So,
I think very early on, when we started to work on films, it was one of the things it's about the story, and it's about the filmmakers, and it's about the, it's the team, it's the story, it's the access, it's the something special, the zhuzh that you can't know until you're hearing about the project, and you just like with the Mole Agent, I knew we wanted to work with Maite. She's an amazing filmmaker. I love her films. And we had this meeting with her and Marcela, the producer in Chile. And when she described this film, we were like, sign us up. It's just the concept.
Without watching footage, anything? Just the premise? Just the...
really had footage at that point. No, it was really just like this premise of film noir documentary, which I love the idea of combining genre with documentary, and this undercover situation with going into a retirement home. And at that time, it was a different mold, by the way. He ended up breaking his hip. So that's why Sergio was casted, and he's obviously changed the whole film.
Sometimes those little things make a whole difference.
Yeah, that whole thing at the beginning when they're like basically put an ad in the paper, the private investigator, that's what happened. And they were shocked that all of these elderly men showed up wanting a job, but I think Maite, when she saw Sergio, was just like, oh, I hope he gets picked, because she could tell right away he had.
You just have like a little one-liner of the film just for the audience that's joining.
The Mole Agent is about a woman thinks that her mother is being mistreated or neglected in a retirement home, and engages a private investigator who brings in his mole, an elderly man in his mid-80s, to go into as a patient undercover as a resident, into the retirement home, and figure out if there's malfeasance. Of course, the film, what happens is Sergio is this incredible person and sensitive, and makes deep connections with these mostly women in this retirement home, and he changes the course of the film because it really becomes about loneliness, and it's not about the neglect from the retirement home, it's about the neglect from the families.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this film was also nominated for an Oscar, right, a few months ago.
Yeah.
And was this released already when COVID was around? The Corona was...
It was premiered at Sundance, and then it was at True False, and then shot. There were many other plans and expectations. So ultimately, we then sold it to Hulu for the SVOD rights, and it was ITVS and POV.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
from the start, and also other co-production companies and territories like Germany and the Netherlands and Spain.
Yeah.
And Chile, obviously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
in a way also, I'd say that maybe the coronavirus era somehow, I don't know, there's like another layer to the film now, knowing that so many elderly people are.
It was interesting because when we first premiered at Sundance, the idea was call your parents, call your grandparents, call your auntie. And then it became something that was like, it was so in the zeitgeist, but also people were calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was interesting how that shifted.
Right. And how would you define your relationship with the directors you work with, like the producer-director dynamic?
I mean, it really depends. Usually, and often we work with, we repeat working with filmmakers. So we're doing a new film with Roger Ross Williams. We're doing a new film we did the second film with Nan Fu. We did, Alison Clayman we're working with again. So, and we're developing something with Maite. So that's one thing, which is interesting because you kind of almost like have this, group of directors that you continue to work with, and you have to keep expanding to find other people that you're going to also include in that. So, but that's one thing. Like, so we've had really robust relationships and really rewarding relationships with directors. And then sometimes it's, we are doing this project, this film on Tanya Tucker and Brandi Carlile creating this album together. And it's a director who we didn't know, and a friend of ours connected us, and she's just great. We're having a blast working with her. And she is wonderfully collaborative. And so that, we're really working closely with her through the process. And also, we have, we had to go and do a huge deep dive into archive with her. And so Daniel Torres, who works with us, went to Nashville with her and spent 2 weeks. And so it's not just us, it's Carolyn Hepburn, who is the head of production and is across everything. So and we have Samantha Bloom, who works with us, and Alejandro Lipin. So it's like very, it's a terrific group of people.
Yeah. So actually I wanted to speak a little bit about the films that are available for the Israeli audience now online and also in the Cinematheque. And I wanted to start with Nan Fu's film.
Yeah.
And I think we also have this little part, maybe we'll see it first and then we'll talk about it. Can you just give us a one-liner before we dive into that piece of that part?
It's about what happened in China when COVID hit, and then subsequently the response in China from the government, and then subsequently the response in the US from the government.
Yeah. So I'll just say that we're going to see a part more or less from the middle of the film. It actually is a part that deals with the nurses and the doctors in the US and in general also. I was in China and around the world thinking about the healthcare people and what they're going through in some places still, and what they'll have to deal with after. So it's a pretty emotional part. Yes. So if it's ready to be shown, let's go for it. We're going to be sending a link to the audience here, just looking at the extract, and then we'll come back here. So let's see if it's ready.
I'll never forget a patient who had do not intubate, do not resuscitate orders already. They actually allowed the wife to come and say her last goodbye to her husband. And she came out of the room, and she just stood there and she looked so lost. She was crying, so I came over and I said I was sorry, and if there was anything else I could do for her. So she just nodded no, and then she said thank you for taking care of him, and I gave her a hug. I probably shouldn't have done that, but I felt so bad for her because she, I was glad she had the opportunity to come and see him, but she was alone and it was just too much. I didn't know what to do. I just like we didn't know what to do. We tried our best to do whatever we could, and it didn't make a difference anyway for a lot of them.
At the time when I spoke with Diana, she had been isolating herself from her husband and 3 kids. She filmed video diaries to show people what healthcare workers were going through. When I talked to healthcare workers like her, I noticed they'd often burst into tears at times when they talked about the deaths they witnessed or their separation from their families, but also at times that seemed unexpected to me.
I'm sorry, hold on.
It was then I realized how vast their trauma must be, and how invisible it still was to the rest of the world.
I guess I need a second. All right. I was just talking with my neighbor today, if I can say this. She was, and we were talking about how everyone is holding up. And you know, my fear, Jesus. I didn't know this was in me, like how upset I'm getting right now. There are nurses, especially in the ICUs, who are dealing with a lot of death and a lot of just patients crashing. You know, a lot of the patients, once they're intubated, don't necessarily make it. And I work in the ED. We had some patients like this, but we didn't have them to the degree and for the length that those ICU nurses have. And if this is how this is making me feel, I don't know how those nurses are gonna crash once they stop and start talking about this stuff.
Okay, so I think we can return. So they just watched this part from Nan Fu Wang's film and your film in the same breath. So I was asking, you know, you guys decided to try to catch a story as it was, you know, going on. How do you work on that kind of film?
I mean, it was kind of multifold. I mean, what happened is, you know, Nan Fu, as the story starts in the film, she was going to be on the jury at Sundance, and she went to drop her son with her mom and meet her husband at Sundance and da-da-da. Well, by the time she landed back, and her mother lives maybe 300 miles from Wuhan, by the time she landed, her husband was getting ready to go already and retrieve Jamie because they were shutting down. And she just, at Sundance, when we saw her and hung out, she was just like, I'm collecting all of these images and I'm starting to pull stuff down. And basically anything that's going up on social media, it's pulled down so quickly if it's critical of the government. So she and Jalin were just like grabbing everything they could and started to kind of create this incredible archive of the you know, the terrible suffering and the insignificant response. And so that was one part of it, was being able to get that. Then it's also like trying to engage people to film there who, you know, can have access and, you know, and who can be sure to stay safe. And I mean, it's a really complicated, that was a whole other complicated situation. And that was really where we started. And then to do interviews, you know, it was the first time Nan Fu had ever done a remote interview. And the first one, I remember we called her afterward and she was like, that was crazy. It felt like I was there.
Wow.
It was so emotional. And we watched the footage and it really did feel like she was in the room with the person. And that's kind of when we knew that this was going to be possible during the pandemic to be able to capture interviews and moments that we just assumed would not be possible. So that was it was a big change. And all of this is happening, like this is between the end of January and you know, mid-March.
Wow.
And everything just went, you know, haywire. And we knew we needed to fund it because we were capturing it as we went, and it was you know, unfolding quite quickly. So we went and pitched the film to, we didn't go, we had Zoom calls and pitched the film to like 3 possible financiers who could fund the whole thing. So that was the other thing. It was like we just didn't want to do a piecemeal. Sorry, there's a helicopter. But you know, so then we spoke to HBO and they were immediately like so supportive of it and so excited about it, and they came on board, and that freed us up at that point to be able to engage crew and teams in China, to be able to think about also as Nanfu kind of was looking and we were looking at what was happening, our own response here. You know, realizing we needed to film here and to try to find people who would film at these rallies. And it was really fraught. And we were very cautious and very careful about the protocols, but it's still, you know, it was very scary to do this film in the midst of all of that.
I'm sure. And it's a very powerful film. How did you know, when is the end? You know, how do you end this? Something that's still, you know.
We got into Sundance. And we
okay.
I mean, that was kind of part of it. Like we knew we could go on and on and on. But I think also, where the film goes, it becomes a very natural ending.
Yeah.
Because it's an ending, but then there's like almost like a new beginning at the very end to show that this goes on. And I think Nanfu found such an elegant way to do that, which was great. It was really, she's amazing.
Yeah, and I was actually about to ask this question later on, but because you just mentioned the pretty amazing way Nanfu interviewed remotely, do you believe that this time that we're at, that I don't know how long it'll take, but what kind of effects do you kind of guess or feel that it might leave on our industry and documentary filmmaking? And
I think one thing is that there will be more collaborations at a distance, which I actually think is great, you know. Because we've done that, and we did this film Ringside, and the editor was in Germany and the director was in LA and the other producer was another city in Germany. I mean, so you end up finding ways to work around that situation. But this was, I just think it's something that we have been doing for a while, but I think it was really proof to everyone that this is a way that can work.
Yeah.
Not ideal. Some people really need to be in the editing room with their editor. And some people feel like this is a way that they can learn to be as creative. So it also depends on the director, depends on the editor.
Right.
And, you know, in terms of filming, it does, I think, you know, I mean, I look at our carbon footprint and the amount of travel that we do, we could lighten that up. And that is something that I'm very interested in, where possible and where it won't damage the film. We want to start to really track that.
Right. I just want to remind people that might have joined us not so long ago that you're welcome to ask questions, and as we're talking, and I'll also ask a question that I was just got a text about. How do you fund your movies? How do you fund your films?
We every way you could possibly imagine. We write grants. We go to markets and pitch, you know, like we go to the IDFA forum type thing. We go and we sometimes have projects that at this stage, in, you know, having been doing this for a very long time, we will have, you know, Netflix come to us and have an idea and a director and a project that they need producers for, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Loud as it is for me, I hope it's not so bad.
It's okay. Yeah.
it's all different ways. Sometimes we do international co-productions. Sometimes we, do ITVS. It's truly every way you can imagine funding a documentary, we do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we're trying to do now, because we kind of work across a slate of films in various stages of development, production, distribution, and we're trying to make it so that we have kind of half the films will either come to us financed or will go to one source to finance that film. And then because we started to really cannibalize ourselves with the, we would apply for a grant for 3 different films, and we just didn't want to be in that situation anymore. So that's a conscious decision that we made to really kind of break it up so that we don't compete against ourselves.
Yeah. That sounds, yeah. And I also wanted to speak about Life Animated. I actually, a few years ago when I was at Full Frame with a short film of mine, I also met Nan Fu, who's there, and I was blown away by her in the same way I think you've been. And I watched Life Animated. If I'm not mistaken, Owen and his family were also there. And it was a very, very, it was a wonderful experience. I remember it very, very
great screening.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask a little bit, how do you approach filming protagonist who's on the autistic on the spectrum, an autistic character? Is it different? Is it something that's in your minds? How do you?
I mean, for sure, it's different because it was also really intimate with Owen, and it was, over time, and it was while he was going through some very, he was graduating from a school program. He was moving out on into this kind of assisted living but on his own from his family. He was in love and had his heart broken. And I mean, it's like kind of all the things that as we're growing up, it's kind of at once, these milestones. And when we realized that there was so much happening, we really wanted to capture that year essentially with him. The key with Owen is that his mother, Cornelia, is super protective, and it was really, her trust was the key thing. So Ross Williams, the director, had known them for years, the family, and had worked with Ron like at ABC, or CNN or something. And yes, Ron Suskind, Owen's father. And so there was innate trust because of that. But we had to earn our trust, Cornelia, and that was a process. And Owen is super trusting, super open, and he's just doing this thing. Like, he's almost like the perfect documentary subject. He does not give a shit what we're doing. He's doing what he's doing, and he is not performing. He's not shy.
Right.
He gets tired, and he wants, like, at some point he's like, I'm done.
Yeah.
So that was the key, is to know when that would to allow him, make sure that he knows that he should let us know when he's topped out, and that right away we respect that, and we let him essentially, kind of tell us when to take a break.
Yeah. And can you just give maybe a little one-liner of the film? And also I wanted to ask you a little bit about the relationship with Disney. How did that work? Were they part of somehow the production?
Definitely not part of it, but well, the film is about a young autistic man and telling the story, as I just said, like all of this year of all of these major changes in his life, but kind of looking back to when he was 3 years old and he became autistic, and stopped speaking, went silent, and how his family learned to communicate with him through the one thing that was his true affinity, which is Disney films, Disney hand-drawn animated films, I should say. And yeah, the Disney part of it, and it's the whole family. It's the parents, Cordelia and Ron, Owen and his older brother Walter, and they're I mean, it's really special, and we love them, and we're still super close with them. And Ron's a brilliant journalist. Cornelia just went back to. I just admire them so much.
Wow.
Something else. So with Disney, what happened is it's complicated because Disney did not want to be perceived as supporting a film that people could think was saying Disney cures autism.
Okay.
So that was one big thing for them. Other than that, what happened is Sean Bailey, who's the head of Disney Studios, is on the board at Sundance. And so Carrie Putnam from Sundance connected us to him, and he became our guardian angel. He really walked us through the process. He was terrific. He understood independent filmmaking. He knew that it was never going to be a Disney film, that's for sure. So, but we had to go and present to all the different departments at Disney and let them know what was happening and stay in touch and show them rough cut and that type of thing. They were really supportive ultimately. And what happened is that we kind of waited. We didn't try to pre-negotiate the agreements. And I think that was a very wise move, because ultimately they felt so positive about the film that they were, I think, more open and generous with us than they would have been. And also with Buck, we had to license that Horse Whisperer from Disney. And so I had created a relationship with Paula there and clearances. So we had a good deal there that we could apply to Life Animated, which was kind of crazy, fortuitous. And we got the final clips, the like 4K restorations, or rather, it was 4K back there, or 2K. And when we were in the color correct, it was that late. And it was like a day that we'll never forget, because we've been looking at kind of shitty, grainy VHS degraded from 10 generations. And then suddenly it's like beauty, color. It's really
beautiful. So the third film that we're screening, the Doc Aviv Film Festival, there's still this weekend to watch it, is Buck, which is also such a beautiful film. So even before I ask questions, can you just describe us briefly the story of Buck? When was it done? Like a decade ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It probably was like 10 years ago. Yeah. I think it premiered in 2011. It's about the real life horse whisperer, Buck Brannaman, who was the kind of basis for that film. And it's his life story, and very complicated and abused, very abused as a kid by his dad, terribly abused, and overcame that through his connection with horses, and then channels that and teaches other people too. As he says, he works with horses with people problems.
Right. Maybe you can also just lean a little bit closer to the mic. Yeah, right. So I was wondering, because I assume, I don't know, maybe you are a horse person, but you are, I know,
I'm not a horse
girl. So I was wondering, how do you, yeah, exactly. So how do you guys enter such a different world as producers?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, Cindy Meal, who's the director and who had this idea, is a horse person. And she didn't need anybody who was a horse person. She needed people who knew everything else, basically, about making films, because this was her first film ever. So we were like great horses, but we were about trying to figure out story and trying to figure out how best to capture what Buck does and the kind of ephemera and magic that he creates. So in a way, it wasn't about horses for us in that way, because it was really about his story, how we were going to tell it, and how we were going to be able to maneuver to find these moments that he creates at these clinics that he has, and also have him open up about his childhood.
Right. As a producer, is it important for you to go out to the field to meet the characters, to be
doing
things?
We're there. That was a first-time director. Yes, it was very important for us to be there.
Yeah.
And she had been shooting, with other teams and had some material, but we did major shoot. We did the major shoots together.
Yeah. And in this stage, when you're like, 100 films and movies, credits are behind you, are you still interested in meeting first-time directors? Do you prefer going with people, as you said, people that are becoming part of the family? And if so, how do you know this one I can trust? Is it the story? Is it the character?
You don't know. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I think we have a pretty good instinct, and we do still occasionally work with first-time directors. Not as often, mainly because, as we discussed, we have, we have repeat offenders who we work with. But I think, there is something very special in helping someone create their first film. And it would be really somebody who you can tell has the right mix of passion and heart and common sense and sense of humor, and the ability to not take it all so seriously. It's serious enough, and what we do is always serious. We don't need to be miserable while we're doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we spoke about first-time directors, producers of ethic, what advice would you give to producers that are their first steps of this profession?
Make connections. It's like we have this great community. I mean, it's a great community in Israel. It's a growing and burgeoning documentary community. It's a worldwide community that we have all of these opportunities to connect. Even if you don't travel, if you can't travel, we found in this last year and a half that there's still so many opportunities, even virtually, to do that. And there's forums, there's festivals, there's people in LA, there's LA Meetup. In New York, you have the DPA, the Documentary Producers Association. So you have all of these groups and affiliations and possibilities of making these kind of connections. And I think I think you can rely so much on the advice and help and support of each other, to come up, especially like the young producers, to be able to seek out other young producers. And we work with other producers all the time. We collaborate. We don't have to be the only producer. Sometimes we executive produce films. And it's I think crucial, because if we didn't do that, we would not be able to make the films that we make. We would make fewer films. Right.
I have a question. We mentioned The Mole Agent that was just nominated for an Oscar. How do you define a successful film?
That's a great question, Tamara. I think it's really interesting because this was our third Oscar campaign, and it's more than our third Oscar campaign. It was our third successful Oscar campaign. We've had many others that are, not as maybe shortlisted, which is successful too. Mm-hmm. But it really made me think a lot about what our metrics of success are and how we have to reestablish that, because everybody gets so caught up in it, and it becomes, Oscar fever, Oscar obsession. And I really thought, it's not worth it, because you know what, you can do that. And basically it's like another job,
right?
You do that for this period and then you finish, and it's like by the time you finish, Sundance has taken place again. There's a new crop of films. Maybe you have a new film and you're starting all over. It's a terrible, like a hamster wheel. And then, you know what, if you ask me what film won 2 years ago, I might not even remember. We make such a big deal of it. And I don't think it makes that drastic a difference.
Yeah.
That there's reason that we should be doing that. And I think we need to look at a lot of other ways. Like, how are you connecting with people? What is the reaction? What kind of if you're doing outreach and engagement, how is that going to develop, over the course of the life of the film? What is the second window? How do you find people in different ways? If you're in cinemas, or you're streaming, or you're going on broadcast, you're going on a festival tour, you're doing, a special screenings tour. There's so many ways to find audiences and connect with them. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to look at those and when we're planning out a film, we look at it as a blank slate, each film. So we don't do any cookie cutter. It's all different. The subjects are all different. The films are all different. The filmmakers are all different. And even if it's the same filmmaker, it's a different stage in their career. And you really have to also figure out and create your own measures of success and metrics for the film. It might change, but it's really important to do that, because if it's that you have to be in cinemas for a particular reason, that's one thing. If it's that you want to do outreach and that's more important, then that's another thing. If educational is the most important thing, whatever it is, figure it out and try to really make that a reality, because, you know, there's very few films that are going to be shortlisted, fewer films nominated, and that one film, who the hell knew the octopus teacher was going to, you know, like, came out of nowhere. So,
yeah, that's true. That's true. Thanks. I have a question from a friend who's a producer. She wanted to know if you approach Netflix, Amazon Studios, whatever, any broadcaster, what do you come with? You come with a pitch? Do you come with footage, research?
Now you really have to come with stuff. You know, you used to be able to just talk about an idea and then get development money and move along. Now you have to have like a deck, ideally. So treatment at least. And then if you're trying to get development money, a treatment and some footage.
Right.
If you are trying to get production funding, a full-fledged deck and a sizzle, a teaser, which is what you would be using that development money for. So, you know, there's basically that is what you're going to need to have, like a real proof of concept.
Yeah. Do you find it's harder now?
It's hard. It's really competitive.
Yeah.
You know, and then also everybody suddenly was doing series.
Right.
And less interested in films. Now there's been a glut of series and they're more interested in films. It's, you know, you move to series and they don't want to do that anymore. You know, you have, the key other thing for producers is be flexible.
Right.
Be fluid. If you aren't able to do that, it's not going to work because it changes all the time. Everyone's like, oh, it's the golden age of documentary, the golden age of documentary. I mean, I've heard that so many times over the years. It's a really good moment for documentaries, but it could change. You know, it's the same kind of a thing. It's like theatrical is dead for documentaries. Then you have Won't You Be My Neighbor, the Mr. Rogers film that does crazy business. That's one film. Then you have another year that like, there's a lot of films that do between 5 and 10 million in the box office, and then suddenly it's a boom.
Yeah.
Huge again. Then it dies. And the problem is everybody builds these things up like at a moment that's saying it's a big moment that you can't live up to it. It's like, you know, Netflix, when they kind of started out, they went out and they bought, you know, you're buying films for $10 million. And then the next year they don't buy anything because they're already producing in-house. So it's everybody expects it to last. It never lasts. I mean, that's the other thing. You have these, like, you're hearing these crazy numbers. It's so rare. Yeah. And it's, for everyone else, it's still the same struggle. There's, you know, only so many slots. Of these, a lot of the streamers want very mainstream kind of pop culture type films. And I think it's hard for them to do any kind of really political or social commentary films, you know, social issue films. And, you know, so yeah, there's more buyers and there's more slots, but it's for a very specific kind of film.
Right. It's even a bit disturbing in a way what you're saying. We have a question from the Q&A from the audience, but I do want to ask one more question before that. You were talking about the trends now, and true crime is pretty popular now, right? Maybe like in a decade we'll say, oh, that was so old school, but for now, that's the feeling I get at least. And I was wondering, what do you feel about, about these shifts, these, you know, trends?
I feel like you ride the waves, and either if it's not something you're interested in, don't worry about it, because it's not going to last that long, because then the next thing everybody's we have too much true crime. Now we want to do you know, you know, if there's something you have that fits and it's in the moment, great. Right. But don't go crazy trying to fit something that doesn't, because in a year they won't want that anyway.
Yeah, it's gonna be old news. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna read the question. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Do you see any difference in the way films are financed according to the gender of the filmmakers? Do you still witness any bias in this regard? Good question.
Good question. You know, with documentary, I feel like we have so many executives who are women, which is great. Historically, you know, it's been the case. it's still like the CEO of the company is generally still a man. So it's kind of this funny imbalance where you feel like the people who make the decisions, but then sometimes the ultimate decision makers are not these women. I would say there are certain people who have an easier time getting series, getting green light, and they are still men. Yeah. It's much more balanced than anywhere else in the world of film. But, you know, I could think of like 5 guys that have a pretty easy time. And then there's like, you have, Chai, who I think is like in that echelon now. And, so there are women that are actually kind of in that special club, let's put it.
Yeah. And I'll go back to the topic we were talking about. So I know you also produce series, right? Documentary series.
Yeah, we did on Facebook, funny enough, Facebook Watch, we did Humans of New York.
No, wow.
That was great. Brandon's wonderful, who is the creator of Humans of New York, the blog, and really spent years filming, and then we worked with him to kind of help create these episodes. Did a true crime series called Murder in the Bayou for Showtime, which I love, with Matthew Galcon, which is a very beautifully crafted, sensitive series, not exploitative.
And what would you say is the major difference between producing or working on a series as opposed to a feature or a short?
I mean, I think it's always about the story and what to me, we want to work in an organic way. Like, we don't want to just do a series because we can stretch it out. Because we know we can do a series. We don't do those. I don't like those. I see way too many of them and they bore me. I don't want to watch something that I'm frustrated the whole time that it should be a film or it should be 3 episodes and it's 10. So that's something we really stay away from. Right now we're doing a film and we were like, there's enough to make it a series. But the director wants it to be a film. We want it to be a film, but that's the interesting thing. We pitched a project as a film, it didn't go. Then we switched it to a series. It also was not a stretch to make that a series, like a 4-part. Didn't go. And then we went back to being a film and we got it funded. So it's like, it's just hard to say. And I think that producing, it's just, you have to work with a bigger editorial team. You have to be really clever about how you spend the money on a series, because it can go very quickly and you have to be incredibly organized and have the right kind of a team to do any kind of a series. And it's just harder not to go over budget.
Yeah. And I was wondering, many people today question the boundaries between a fiction and a nonfiction. Is there a difference? Is it right to treat it as 2 different, work? And I was just wondering about your thoughts about it.
And there's definitely a difference, and but I like that it's becoming grayer and grayer, because, again, I keep going back to this, but it's true. It's about storytelling, and if you're telling a story that's compelling and going to get somebody really involved and focused on it, it doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction. I'd say we do documentaries. Sometimes we have fiction elements. We did Socks on Fire, which has fictional, like reimaginings, which I think are beautiful. And, but I look at films like I Carry You With Me, Heidi Ewing's film, which is fiction and then kind of becomes a documentary. And I love that. I love the idea of trying to figure it out and crack this nut, because I think, we really want to tell stories in the most elegant way and the most cinematic way. Yeah. So if that means there's going to be elements of fiction, I think that's great. And one thing that's crazy is that like our films are being optioned to be remade as fiction.
Wow.
So, I mean, we have the Kill Team, which Dan Krause directed both the documentary and the fiction remake, and then Sergio, which Greg Barker did the same thing. And Roger Russ Williams right now is working on a short doc that we had done, is working on that as a feature. And he had directed the short as well. And then some of them were like optioning to other studios or other people. So this is a whole other thing. It's become like, instead of a book, optioning a documentary. So it's
wow, that's interesting. Does it open your appetite producing fictional pieces?
No.
You're loyal.
It doesn't make me want to do that now.
That's the right answer for the document. Dr. V Festival Q&A. What do you hate and what do you love the most about what you do?
Oh, what I love the most is I get to meet so many incredibly interesting people, delve into these lives, make new family essentially. You know, there's so many times that the people that we're, you know, the Susskind family or the Sung family from Abacus, you know, we spent time with Sergio in LA when he came for the Oscars. I mean, just, you get to really expand your world and travel and meet incredible people. I mean, it's a joy. And have a creative outlet that's really significant. What don't I like? What do I hate? I hate the competition. I hate the waste. I don't hate fundraising really. I hate when somebody doesn't want to fund a film that I think is really worthy.
Yeah.
It just makes me more determined though.
Right. And in looking at like a film, working on a film, what is the part that you like the most? Is it the prey? Is it like the ideas, the freshness, the filming itself, watching the footage, post, the editing?
I like the initial shaping of what it's going to be and the planning it out and figuring out how we're going to tackle it.
Yeah.
And I love watching cuts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was wondering, first of all, like looking back at the industry when you entered and today, what is like the biggest difference you feel that happened besides, you know, all these like, I assume Netflixing popping up and stuff like that?
What's different now, you mean, from when I started?
Yeah, the industry back then. And also like in a way.
I heard about documentaries back then. It was like, yeah, I mean, they did, you had the documentary audience, but it was so limited. And
what age is years more or less you start like your?
It's like 20 something years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was like a niche thing.
It was definitely niche, and it was definitely more PBS and HBO. That was like it, you know, like you didn't have a lot of these options, or you would, you know, it's just grown, and the appetite has grown, and people's sophistication around documentary as an audience has grown. And I think that just, it's exponential how that's changed. So that's pretty extraordinary. So, you talking to somebody, what do you do? Tell me a film you did. One Child Nation. Oh, I saw that on Amazon. I mean, it's really crazy. Like, it was never like that. People would never be like, oh, I saw your film. They would be like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
It's like, thank you for feeding me, you know, Brussels sprouts kind of attitude.
You suddenly become the popular kid.
Yeah. I don't know about the popular kid, but more so, I mean, and even like, you know, I think like people who make, you know, I think it's also interesting is people who make fiction films are very interested in documentary when you talk about it. And that was never the case. Really never the case. That's new too. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just remind people that are with us here, we're about to finish in like 5 minutes. So if you have any questions you'd like me to ask, I'd love to. And I know it's a bit tricky talking about projects you're working on currently, but if there's even one that you feel that is more,
the Tanya Tucker, Brandi Carlile film, I love that one.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
It's about So Tanya Tucker was a country and western star. She had the song Delta Dawn, which is very well known, and she was a kind of an outlaw when women were not allowed to be outlaws in that world. She's an inspiration and a hero to Brandi Carlile, who decided to do what Rick Rubin did for Johnny Cash late in his career and write an album that she would record. And Kathleen Horan, who is making the film, captured that whole process. And it's this incredible intergenerational women story. And it's also beautiful, and the music is amazing, and the creative process is fantastically captured. So I love that film. Mm-hmm. That's in progress, and we have a lot going on. I mean, we're doing, with a lot of different places. We're doing film with HBO. We're doing a couple films with Netflix. We're, we are, doing a new film with Universal Music. We did Velvet Underground, Polygram there.
Oh, that's nice.
So, and that's been really great, actually, doing music projects that we really love, like a band like Velvet Underground that we all just love so much. And this is somebody who's completely different. She's not announced, but it's totally different, but it's also, it's kind of pleasurable to work on the film and to also for people to enjoy it. It's fun. Mm-hmm. Break up the heaviness that we,
Yeah, that's important also. We spoke about a lot of wonderful and successful things you were part of, and thank you for that. But I was wondering if you can also share with a mistake you remember, or something that you regret doing or not doing at some point during your career.
I kind of had an opportunity to work on Man on Wire years ago, and somehow that slipped away, and I just love that film. So that always makes me sad.
You know, to see why? Like, well, what was it? It was like insecure.
It was like at this moment when they were like kind of a little lost and trying to raise money, and then they got all their money in like one fell swoop, and they were like, see ya.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you so much. This was really wonderful and interesting, and good luck at Cannes. I hope you also have the opportunity to see films in your busy schedule. And I'll just say to the audience that I'm inviting all of you to join us on our next masterclass at 8 p.m. Tel Aviv time with Sebastian Pardo and Riel Roth-Dichter. So thanks, Julie, again. It was a pleasure.
Such a pleasure. Thanks.
Bye-bye.